Well, good morning and welcome to our virtual gathering. We're so excited to be here, and I know that we have a very interesting guest today. I'm Patricia Maltz, and I'd like to introduce our CEO and co-founder, Jean Ketcham. Jeannie, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Pat. All right, we have with us today Jennifer Tacheny, and she is co-director of Young Adult Spirituality. And Jennifer, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much.
Or I guess it's our gathering, but it's still a show. Okay, you work with I know you work with the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet and their ministries division. Can you tell us a little bit about that? You know, we've been connected with them for like 7 years. They've always been one of our sponsors. So we love to hear more about them. I'd like for you to explain a little bit about that organization if you can.
Sure. The Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet are a religious order of women here in St. Paul, and they are connected to the congregation which goes across the country. So there are Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet in Albany, New York, in St. Louis, in LA, Japan, and in Peru as well, and Hawaii. And so we are a community of women religious and their associates. So they have associates with them as well, which are men and women who align with the mission, but do not take religious vows. So this group is kind of a growing group of men and women that align with the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet to kind of be engaged with their mission and in their work. So my work is with young adult spirituality, mission engagement, and membership with the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet. So I get to work with young people who see this group of women, mostly women, doing amazing things in our communities, doing a lot of social infrastructure, a lot of social justice work. And I get to work with young people and teach them about the community and create opportunities for young people to engage with the mission of the community.
Well, Jennifer, now I know that they have the sisters, they have this, they're all over the country, aren't they? I mean, aren't they in Florida and, some other places? So do they do the same thing? Is somebody do the same thing at these other places that you do here in St. Paul?
Well, each of the places across the country have associates that connect with them. Similarly, what's distinct about what we do here in St. Paul is we have a particular outreach to young adults that's kind of unique. But it is true that Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet across the country and in Peru and Japan have associates that join with them in their work as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know because we are worldwide. Aging but Dangerous covers a lot of territory. So you introduced us to a new term. It's called eco-justice. And tell us what that is.
Sure. So in our work with young adults and in young adult spirituality, we're very aware that for young people, the environment is a really big deal. It's a really big issue. It's a high stress. I also have children, and so I know that young people are very concerned about global warming and the environment. Eco-justice is just short for ecological. So ecological justice is, looking at what's happening with the planet through a justice lens. So caring about what's happening for the planet and seeing that as a justice issue. So eco-justice. So a lot of our work with young adults here in St. Paul focuses on eco-justice, looking at what's happening to the environment and its impact on people as a justice issue and thinking about it in some cases, thinking about it maybe from a religious perspective, but also just as a social justice issue. And then thinking about how that impacts our spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is so interesting. Well, what are some of the projects you're involved in, Jennifer?
Well, I just came this morning from where I was working with third graders to pull up the plants from our garden, from our school garden, and to plant bulbs for next spring. So my hands are a little dirty as we speak. But basically, I find myself in gardens all over the city. We have a community garden here on the sisters' property, which is open to neighbors and sisters and college students. And we garden. We were just in the garden last night, putting the garden to bed and harvesting all of our squash and pumpkins and planting garlic for next spring. I also work with here, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet are adjacent to St. Catherine University.
Yes.
So I do a lot of work with the college students around eco-justice, around gardens on their campus, and then kind of seeing a bit more about how this gardening connects with other issues of justice. Here at St. Kate's with the students, we grow the food in our gardens, and then we bring the fresh produce into our food shelf, which we open up to St. Catherine University students every other week. Because we've learned more and more food insecurity is a big issue on college campuses. About 1 in 3 college and university students in this country experience food insecurity.
Now, what do you mean? Now, what do you mean food insecurity?
Thank you. Food insecurity is simply not being able to access enough healthy nutrients in a day.
Oh, okay.
So it could be that you can afford to buy a bag of chips and you can still be food insecure because you might be able to afford to buy some calories, but in the definition of food insecure, it's about healthy calories.
Okay.
So, it used to be kind of a concept, oh, you're in college, you're starving, that's par for the course. That's well, that narrative is no longer like cute or acceptable. It's like, no one should be hungry. And if you're going hungry so that you can pay for college, that's an issue. That's a justice issue that we should be addressing, because that's going to impact your ability to perform and to be whole. So more and more across college campuses in our country, there are food shelves popping up and to address food insecurity. So if you do a search, you'll see there was a report over the summer in the Washington Post that pulled some of the most current statistics, and that's where I'm getting the 1 in 3, about 1 in 3 approximately university students in this country are experiencing food insecurity. So here in St. Paul, we are growing gardens with the Sisters of St. Joseph and with St. Catherine University. We're engaging students in growing our own food, and then we're harvesting that food and we're sourcing it in our food shelf the very next day. So last night we harvested. Today, after this call, I run over to the food shelf and I'll organize that food. And in addition to non-perishable items as well, but then we have this whole table full of fresh collard greens, kale, green tomatoes right now because it's the end of the season, peppers, squash, and so students can access that.
Wow, Jennifer, that is just, there's so many parents that would not know that, I think. I mean, don't you agree, Pat?
Absolutely, I agree. And I think that there are so many older Americans that could also need that food shelf and suffer from food insecurity. And we've never even talked about that, Jeannie.
No, yeah. I know. I mean, this is like, this hits our followers because we have so many of those 50-year-olds that their kids are starting to go to college. And that is, I've never, ever heard of that. That is so important. Wow.
So do a little research about that issue. And something that we've been working on with the food shelf is how we frame it, because a lot of people come to the idea with there's a taboo or a stigma around needing help and going to a food shelf. And we can all kind of relate to that. We get that there is a stigma with that. So what we say to students is we say, we have this food shelf on campus. Perhaps you've heard of it. If you're even thinking at all that, oh, maybe I could go, or maybe maybe it would be helpful. If that even crosses your mind, then believe you do need it and believe it would be helpful and just show up. We're just trying to say and if you show up, please don't feel like you're taking food away from someone else who might need it more. It's that kind of thinking isn't really helpful. It's like, if you think you might need it, and I would say this to your population too, if you think it might be helpful, just do it. And try it and see, and kind of, because it is a growing problem, and there are resources out there, and there are communities that want to participate in the solutions around this. So it's like, engage in it. And
okay.
Yeah.
But those college kids, so they get that fresh food and everything, do they have a place to cook it? Do they even know how to cook it? I mean,
that's a great question. And many of the students that access the food shelf here have families as well, and so they are cooking, and they have apartments, and they have places to cook the food. Yes, and several live off campus as well, so there's that. But we also are trying to do more and more with recipes and sampling, and that kind of thing as well. So
I love this. That is so exciting. Wow. I'm a real food. I love to cook every night, and I'm a real food person. So this really, I love this, the whole, I have a little granddaughter that's 11, and she loves to cook, and we get together. We're already planning Christmas together. She's in Chicago, and we're going to, okay, Josie, we got to come up with some good recipes and, healthy stuff. And so I really get into that. That's very exciting. Well, you're also involved with this Pollinator Pathways project.
Yes.
And explain that, please.
Sure. So the Pollinator Pathways project is something we're working on with faculty, staff, and students at St. Catherine University. It's to create, essentially to create healthy habitats for pollinators. So currently, we're working on a pollinator commons, we're calling it, which is an area that's going to have a lot of plants that are pollinator friendly. And it's adjacent to a parking lot. So it's kind of, in a way, it's sort of like an offset to the parking lot. But we just built a pathway, and on either side of the path, we're planting a bee lawn. And a bee lawn is grasses that are flowering grasses that like clover, and some types of like vetch, that these are grasses that flower, and then bees and other pollinators can get the nectar from those flowers. So it's good for our pollinators. So the University of Minnesota is doing a lot of work around bee lawns, and bee lawns are a part of this pollinator pathway concept. That kind of thinking, maybe there might be a time where mowed green grass lawns are no longer the norm, that you have to put a lot of chemicals on, and to keep maybe the norm might become something more like grasses and gardens that really benefit our environment, as opposed to kind of lawns that can be a detriment to our environment. So the bee lawns and the pollinator pathway is a project. And what's exciting about the pollinator pathway is, in St. Paul, we have University of St. Thomas, Macalester College, and they both have bee or pollinator pathways on their campuses as well. So kind of creating areas of habitat that are healthy for pollinators, and then labeling the plants in those areas, and educating people who come to those gardens and areas, good for a pollinator, why, and then we're saying, we're kind of connecting the pollinator pathway at one university with a pollinator pathway at another university to say, you could go there too. And then we can kind of see that together we're creating even more healthy pollinators in these various areas.
So they do this throughout the country at other universities?
I don't know if it's throughout the country. I mean, I think that would be something to research. I know that locally here, we're doing it throughout like the Twin Cities. I'm not sure of the breadth of that at this time, but it's a concept to consider if it hasn't been done,
Jennifer, what are some other, besides bees, what are other pollinators? Would it be butterflies?
Yeah, bees, butterflies, birds are also pollinators, and bats are pollinators as well. I think some types of beetles. So there's a variety of insects and birds that act as pollinators. And do you want me to say a word about why creating pollinator habitats is important, or?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So what we're learning through science, you know, you may be aware of like the issue with bees. You may have heard of colony collapse disorder, and you know, bees are basically, their health is at risk. So we know bees are kind of like suffering. We've also heard that monarchs, you know, the monarch population has ebbed and flowed in their health. So, you know, so what we're noticing is that because of all of the toxic chemicals we use in agriculture, it's having an impact on our insects. And across the world, we're seeing this at a detrimental level, like in China. So many chemicals are used off their pollinators. So they're having to, so when there aren't pollinating insects around, you don't get a crop because you need those pollinators to pollinate your plants. And so you can Google this if you haven't seen this yet, but there are areas in China where the environment is so degraded that they have resorted to humans pollinating the fruit trees, one flower at a time, dipping into the pollen, putting it on the flower.
Oh my God.
So this is the extreme of the problem, but you can see this and you can research it. Google that. And so because the pollinators are struggling because of all the toxins in the environment, we're trying to create environments that where pollinators will thrive. So that so we're kind of trying to, in a way, sort of offset the chemical degradation in our world, in agriculture, by creating healthy pollinator habitats so that you know, they can thrive and continue on. So
gosh, Jennifer, you are doing such good work. That's just it's just amazing. Well, you know, since our listeners are older with aging is dangerous, what are a couple of tips that you could give all of us to engage these young adults in spirituality related conversations, because it is so important, I think.
Well, I mean, here with the Sisters of St. Joseph, we see eco-justice and our work for the environment as a spiritual. We have found that this is a really authentic way to engage with young people, because young adults may consider themselves spiritual, not religious,
right?
Certainly but many are very concerned about the environment. So engaging in these kinds of projects with young people is a great way to, you know, build relationships, do something that's good for yourself and the world, and, you know, call it spiritual if you want. But certainly in our gardens and in our work, we delve into issues of meaning and spirituality, life and death around pruning and what lives and what dies. I mean, it's endless. So I think for any generation of people really who want to engage with young adults, I think it's good to listen to what they care about, and to kind of go with their interests. So in this case, the environment, which, you know, I think it's also important to model the behavior that you're kind of talking about desiring. So if we're talking about ecology, it's pretty important to model. So it's like, I find young people really care, like, do you compost your stuff? You know, do you recycle? So model behavior. And then just showing up authentically is important with young adults, because they'll see right through you. You know, if you're like, I
know, you know, it's interesting. I have to throw this story in. My daughter, when she got married quite a few years ago, but all she wanted for her birthday is in July. All she wanted was a compost, and her husband went out and bought her a piece of jewelry at Tiffany's, and she was so disappointed. I mean, you know, it was just like, oh, all I wanted was a compost, you know, that she could. I mean, it was really funny. So I think he's kind of getting the idea now, but it was kind of a little bit heartbreaking that, you know, she'd rather have that over a piece of jewelry from Tiffany's. But I do think I do think the young people, they are, well, we're all concerned about the environment, but I do think they're coming up because they're going to be such a big part of it. So Jennifer, thank you so much for being our guest. It was just very, very eye-opening. I really, really enjoyed it. Pat, do you have anything else you wanted to know?
No, I'm just so excited about all of the subjects that Jennifer raised today and how they can resonate both with our young people and our own aging but dangerous community.
Right. And just bless your heart for getting out there and doing these things. My gosh, it is so wonderful. So anyway, Jennifer, have a great day, and thank you so much for being on our virtual gathering.
Thank you so
And
much.
everyone, please remember to subscribe and like this video. Thank you much. Have a great day.